Well, g'day guys, and welcome to what is part 10 of our off-grid series. You guys have been absolutely loving the series, which is awesome because we're having so much fun creating it and sharing some of our knowledge and tips and things that we've learnt along the way after the last couple of years travelling on the road.
Yeah, and also loving getting all your tips from the comments as well and applying those to our setup and life. So yeah, thanks so much for all your help with that as well. So
yeah, it's been
what's
really
this one all about?
So this one's all about waste. It's something that people probably don't consider. It's certainly something we didn't consider that much before we set off, but we're going to be covering not just your rubbish and your day-to-day waste, but also grey water, and of course the big taboo topic, toilet systems for caravans and RVs, compost versus cassette. Which one should you choose and which one suits you? Before we dive into that, though, we do have a couple of things to get through. As with all of this series, thanks to Everything Caravan and Camping for chucking us a $100 voucher to give away.
Yeah, so if you want to enter the giveaway for that, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel. There's a link in the description to sign up to the Everything Caravan and Camping newsletter and leave us a comment, any comment, what you thought about the video, say g'day, even a smiley face, and you're in the draw. So
yeah,
good
easy
luck.
as that. Make sure in that comment, just let us know that you've signed up to both the ECC newsletter and subscribed to the channel. Makes it heaps easier for us to find your comment, and you're far more likely to win that voucher. Speaking of winning the voucher, congratulations to Exploring Oz Adventures. You guys have won the $100 voucher from our last video about food prep and preparing for extended off-grid stays. So thanks guys for your comment and thanks for following along. Really glad to hear you guys have been enjoying this series.
Send Simon an email, simon@thelifestylepioneers.com, and we'll get in touch with the guys from Everything Caravan Camping and get that voucher off to you. And again, thank you so much to everyone who watches the ads on our YouTube channel. As you know, we donate 10% of all revenue from this channel to charity. We have cracked over $16,000 donated to charity. Thanks to you, legends. Thank you so much for that extra time that you've spent watching the ads. Much appreciated, guys.
One last bit of exciting news before we dive into it is our new website has just gone live, thelifestylepioneers.com. After you're finishing watching this video, jump over there and check us out and let us know what you think of that one. There's blogs and articles there. We've got a new newsletter that you guys can sign up to as well. We're going to be sharing heaps in there, giveaways, discounts, all that sort of stuff can all be found now on our website, which we're super excited about. G'day, James. James is back. Massive shout out to John Brooks, our mate who created the website for us. He's done an outstanding job. Can't thank you enough, John. Really appreciate that.
He's single too, ladies. Let me know.
All right, guys, let's dive into it. Let's go and have a chat a little bit about waste off-grid.
All right, so step one in reducing and helping with your waste is to minimise your packaging where possible at the supermarket. So when you're at the supermarket, if possible, choosing things that are packaged environmentally friendly or have zero packaging at all really does help in the long run. We've just been at Aldi, we've just stocked up, we had pretty much absolutely nothing left in the caravan, and so we've just provisioned for a couple of weeks, just topping up a few supplies, but this is a great one to show you what we do with all our waste. I'm going to just show you through the caravan. Actually, I think it'll be easier if I show you through the caravan first and then show you what we've got. So as I said, most of our supplies are empty at the moment, so it'll be easy for you guys to see. What you can see up here in the cupboard is we have a heap of storage containers. The storage containers are amazing for a couple of reasons. One is that they keep your food fresher for longer, so just keeping it airtight, which means that it will stay better for a lot longer. Two is organising it. It's much easier to tessellate food into those containers and have everything sitting organised in your caravan and being able to see where everything is. It means things don't get forgotten. It's easy to see how much you've got left of something. It means you don't double up and buy things you don't need. And the third one, the other reason we love them is because we can unpackage all of our groceries into those containers and get rid of the rubbish, usually at the supermarket or where we're unpacking. So we've just run into the Aldi supermarket and we've come back. Where we're camped at the moment in a free camp, it does have rubbish facilities. So we will dump all of our rubbish and all of our packaging before we go, and I'm going to show you at the end. You're going to be absolutely amazed at how much rubbish and how much packaging there is just from a supermarket shop. And I'm sure, you know, when you think about how much rubbish does your family or do you generate, think about your wheelie bin. How often do you take that out and how much rubbish is in it? How much is in your recycling? How much is it? If you would have to, imagine you had to carry your wheelie bin around with you on the road. So as you can see, we have generated a heap of cardboard and plastic waste. The best place to get rid of this is at the supermarket. If you can, if you've got your caravan parked in the supermarket, they usually have the really big bins available there with recycling, so you can separate it as you go. So I'm going to take this out of the van now and pop that in the bin where we are, because I know that's just across the road. This makes a huge difference. This is 3 bags of cardboard, plastic, and hard plastics that we no longer have to carry. If we hadn't done this, at some point all of this rubbish would be in our bin bags.
Yeah, and we absolutely love this style of packing as well. It's like the other advantage, just apart from getting rid of all that waste, is just how neatly and how much more food we can fit in here once all that packaging's taken away. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but we fit, you know, 2 full packets of Jats into one of these, and that tub at the back's got 3 packets of rice crackers in there. You know, or we bought 4 packets of muesli bars, just taking all the muesli bars out of the packet. They can just fit in so much easier. So this is our snacks cupboard, and we've just got all our dried fruit and biscuits and different snacks, a couple of different types of rice crackers, some like Vita Wheats, and just our general sort of day-to-day snack food is all up in here, and we can fit so much more in by getting rid of that rubbish, as well as making it much neater to stack in, and we don't get as much damage. Now, these containers keep it pretty fresh as well. I mean, we'll go through this in a couple of weeks, so it's not like it's going to go stale or anything like that. That coupled with these minimise containers, we've been spruiking these for, well, since we got them 2 years ago. These are from Howard's Storage World. If you want to go grab yourself some, we've got no association with them, but they just work really, really well just to use that vertical height in the cupboards.
We've had them since we got married. What year was
so we
that?
didn't actually buy these Tupperware containers. These ones. I think they call them pantry mates or something. Yeah, pantry mates. We got these as a wedding present, so we had them for a long time before we started traveling, but they're perfect for caravanning, and in our new van they fit too high, too deep, and work really well in conjunction with those minimise containers. So yeah, loving it. And I love things being, Liz is smiling in the background behind the camera because she knows how much I froth on things being neat and tidy and organised. I'm thinking about when we get home, when I have a shed, I'm going to buy a Tupperware just to keep my shed organised. Yeah, as well as getting rid of waste, it's just a really effective way of stacking everything nice and neatly. I mean, you can see here we're provisioned for at least 2 weeks, and we've got still room to spare. We do try and keep as much as we can. Keep lightweight stuff and bulky stuff up here, things like the snack foods and things like that, and then under the bench seat here we keep all the sort of heavier stuff, and then all our cans mostly fit under the kickboard in our van. So if you've seen our interior walk around, you know in our titanium we've got that awesome little extra bit of drop down kickboard storage, which is really good for all the cans and jars and things, just to keep the weight down low in there, and really easy to get to. So just one more thing I just forgot to mention, when the other advantage of getting rid of packaging is what we find is a lot of the packaging marks the inside of the cupboards when it moves around when you're traveling and things, because of the ink in the cardboard especially. So you'll notice we even keep our box of Wheat Bix inside one of these plastic containers, because these plastic minimise containers, as well as these Tupperware containers, don't damage the cabinetry anywhere near as much, or hardly at all, in fact. So that's another big advantage to getting rid of all that cardboard plastic, all this cardboard type packaging. All this ink, if that's rubbing on your cabinetry, will transfer the ink. Now it does come off again, but it's just a lot of scrubbing and cleaning, extra cleaning to get it off. So yeah, it's just a win-win-win, getting rid of as much of your rubbish as you can at this point when you're in town generally getting groceries. Just makes life so much simpler for the next couple of weeks. A bit more effort now, but yeah, worth it in the long run. The times when we haven't done it because we've been in a hurry, we've regretted it, because it's a small work later, and you got to carry all that extra rubbish. So although a lot of this is cardboard and could be burnt, we don't have fires that often, so it's not that convenient to burn it.
Job done. I think there's a beer calling my name.
Yeah.
This one. Is it yours?
Yes.
Well, mine now.
Yes. Well, kind of. Let's put another one in the freezer.
Yeah, let's get another one in the freezer.
Rightio, so some good tips there as to how to minimise the amount of rubbish that you're going to have once you get away from it and get off grid. But no matter what you do, you're still going to generate a fair bit of rubbish. I mean, if you think about how much rubbish you put in your bin that you put out to the curb every day when you're in your house and how much rubbish is in there, chances are you're going to have a similar amount of rubbish when you're living on the road. You're going to generate a similar amount of rubbish. So you've got to have a good solution for storing that rubbish before you get the opportunity to put it into a bin, because particularly as you go more and more remote, bins are few and far between. We see these sort of small rubbish bags on the back of cars and stuff, and I just don't see that they're adequate if you want to do an extended period off grid. So one of our solutions was the storage bag that we had on our old caravan. If you watch some of our older videos when we had our zone, we had the PM canvas bag hanging off the spare tyre. That was fantastic because it fit a heap of rubbish and it allowed us to separate the rubbish as well into two compartments, because even though recycling is few and far between out there, it's really hard to find recycling sometimes. We still like to try and do the right thing and at least separate it to begin with, so that if we do come across recycling, that we can do the right thing and get rid of it responsibly. With the new van, with the spare tyre being a bit higher up on the rear bar, we're not too sure that a bag's going to work that well for this one, but we do have this awesome big firewood carrier box here that is great for taking firewood into our campsite, and then it's a great spot for rubbish when we're heading out of the campsite or as we're travelling along, and it keeps it nice and secure, but also out of our main storage area so we don't get those smells and leaks and everything like that anywhere in our van or in our vehicle. We are going to get another PM canvas bag for our new setup when we build the 76 in the coming weeks. We're going to be putting a PM canvas spare wheel cover and putting our rubbish bag on the back of the car, which will be even more practical because often we've been going on day trips and things like that, and you forget to take your rubbish with you and you find a great spot to get to a bin and you don't have the rubbish with you. So by having it on the car, it means that no matter where we are and what we're doing, we've always got our rubbish with us and we can dump it a bit more frequently, which is going to be really handy. So yeah, it's just something to take the time to consider depending on what your setup is, how you're going to store and carry your rubbish, how long you're going to go off grid for, and how long in between towns and things like that where you might find rubbish facilities, to make sure that you've taken care of your waste responsibly. And it doesn't hurt to have a bit of extra storage for rubbish as well, even more than what you're going to generate for yourself, because unfortunately there's a lot of people out there that don't do the right thing. So having an extra spare bag and a bit of extra spare space so you can clean up some of these campgrounds and stuff that are around where people have done the wrong thing is really awesome to be able to do as well. Our kids have sort of learnt over the last couple of years, and they're pretty good at beach combing and combing campgrounds and stuff for rubbish. We try and avoid them picking it up, obviously, but yeah, they can come and let us know if they find some rubbish and we can make sure we get rid of it responsibly, which is always good to be able to do that as well. Okay, grey water. We see a lot of questions and comments and everything about this in all the travelling Facebook groups and everything like that. Everyone always wants to know about grey water. But firstly, what is grey water? Well, grey water is basically all your wastewater that isn't your toilet. So it's going to be the water from your sink, your vanity, your shower water. If you've got a washing machine like us, dishwasher, if you're lucky enough to have one like us, all that wastewater is classed as grey water. So it's everything except for your toilet. That grey water in generally gets stored in what's known as a grey water tank, which is basically just a holding tank to retain that grey water that it can then be disposed of somewhere. We find that a lot of people seem to think you need a grey water tank in a lot more places than what you actually do. There's not that many places in the country, campsites or anything, where you need to have a grey water tank. There's no national parks or anything like that. There seems to be this myth out there that you need to retain grey water in national parks. We've never come across a national park that you have to retain your grey water. Let us know if you have. Leave us a comment below. Is there anywhere in the country that you've been where you've actually been told you have to retain grey water? Most places we go, people want that grey water put onto trees and plants and the vegetation and things like that to help keep them alive and keep them green. So always try and use environmentally responsible detergents and things like that. But generally it's fine to let it go straight onto the ground. There are some areas though where you do need a grey water tank. Generally they're the 48-hour, 72-hour type rest stops in a town. So off the top of my head, Rockhampton is one. There's one over in Geraldton in WA, Portland in Victoria.
all around the country. Good councils have got these free camps where you can go and stay for a couple of days while you restock and things like that. And in general, those you do have to be able to retain your grey water. So you've either got to have a grey water tank. Generally, a bucket won't cut it. You can't just dump it into a bucket. It has to be a sealed container. You can get portable versions of them. So if you don't have a built-in grey water tank in your setup, you can get portable versions that are specifically designed for it that are sealed to then be able to carry that grey water to the next place that you're able to dump it responsibly. But apart from that, like I said, there's not that many places where you'd need to retain your grey water. So a grey water diversion is a really good idea, which basically just means that the grey water doesn't always go into your tank and then back out again. It bypasses the tank in places where you don't need to retain it, because that stops your tank getting smelly. Grey water tanks can get smelly very, very easily and very, very quickly, particularly in the warmer climates. So we try and keep our grey water valve open almost all the time, or at least as much as possible. And if we have been anywhere where we need to retain it, as soon as we get out of town, we crack that valve and drain that grey water just on the side of the road or something like that. And it's not a bad idea to lean the van over, if you can, towards the grey water valve outlet, just to get as much of that water out as possible, just so you don't have anything sloshing around in the tank, because it can go, as I said, pretty mank and pretty smelly pretty quickly. If you've got airbags like us, you can also use the airbags to lean your van over, or whatever it is that you've got, to lean it over and drain that water out completely. Not a bad idea if you've got water available too, just to give it a quick flush of fresh water, just to flush any nasties out that are still retained in there. So when it comes to grey water around your kitchen sink and things like that, it's a really good idea to scrape your dishes really well. The plumbing in caravans and campers and things like that is pretty small, and you just want to avoid as much of that as possible going into that grey water tank. So yeah, scraping your plates really well and things like that before you do your dishes isn't a bad idea. Brushing your hair before you have a shower, especially if you've got the long locks like me, just to try and stop as much stuff as possible going down those drains. And like I said, using eco-friendly detergents is a great idea as well. As far as capacity for that grey water tank, we've generally had one around the 80 litre mark, which is plenty. You could probably get away with a smaller one. It just depends how long you want to stay and what you want to be doing in those places where you do need to retain grey water. But like I said, there's just not that many times where we actually have to use it. And you've obviously got your hose as well, so you can divert your grey water away from your van and put it straight onto a tree without ever retaining it in your tank, which is by far the better way to go if you're somewhere where you can do that. So in short, it is a good idea to have a grey water tank if you want to be able to camp anywhere and everywhere, but generally it's only those places, like I said, where you need to be fully self-contained, which generally means retaining grey water and having an internal toilet. So if you're not going to camp in those sort of spots, like if you're going to be going off-grid and just heading out bush and camping in national parks or free camping or whatever it might be, you probably don't need a grey water tank. So it's not a must-have by any means. It is a nice to have though if you're going to be travelling long-term or full-time, just to give yourself that flexibility of campsites. Not a bad idea to have one. And you don't have to, I get the question a bit too, whether you need to count that into your weight limits, the capacity of that tank. I don't think you should. Generally, it's water that's transferred, or nearly always going to be water that's transferred from your tanks, from your freshwater tanks into your grey water tank. It's just gotten dirty on the way. So it's going to be the same weight that you're carrying, unless you're going to go and fill your freshwater tanks while you're still retaining grey water, which is pretty unlikely. You're probably going to go and dump your grey water before you're going to go and fill up with fresh. Then there's no need to count the capacity of a grey water tank in your weight limits as well. Just something else I thought I'd throw in there, because we have seen a few questions about that get thrown around. Like I said, let us know, where have you had to retain grey water? Have you ever found it in a national park? We see a lot of myths and rumours about this, but after 2.5 years of travel, like I said, very few places we've ever had to retain grey water. Grey water bypass, great idea, and yeah, having at least a small capacity to retain grey water will open up a few more campsites to you, and they can be pretty handy ones, those little rest areas and 24-hour, 48-hour rest stops.
All right, toilets.
Composting toilets.
Got to be one of the number one questions we get asked about.
Face to face. Lots of people get really embarrassed to ask online, but face to face.
We do get a lot of comments though. A lot of people and DMs, people asking, composting toilet, how's it go? Should we get one?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to cover off a few things here. We're not going to cover off how it works and how to use it and everything like that. I think there's enough content about that out there. Aussie Destinations Unknown, Chris and Miriam, mates of ours, have done a video on it. Go and watch their video about how it all works.
Yeah.
This is just our opinion on the pros and cons and who it suits and who it doesn't. If you're not familiar with caravan toilet systems or RV toilet systems, there's really in Australia two major types. That's your cassette style toilet, which is all your waste and some water goes into what is it called a cassette, which is a removable small holding tank basically that you then need to tip out at dump points, which are around the country in towns generally, but scattered around the country, which basically just goes into the septic system. It's raw sewage. There are some chemicals you put in them. The other type,
And they flush.
and they flush. Yeah,
So they use water out of your fresh water supply.
Yeah, and then the other main type is what we've got, and we've had in both our caravans, which is a compost style toilet. There's a number of brands out there. We've had the Nature's Head twice, just because it's what we know and use. Disclaimer though, we've never used a cassette toilet, so we don't. Everything we know about them and what we've heard is just exactly that, what we've heard about them. It's not our own experience, so we won't go into too much into them. We're just going to talk about the pros and cons of the compost because that's what we know.
And what I think most people are curious about.
Yeah, because I think there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to both systems, and that's why you're going to see people continue to use both systems. The compost really suits us in the way we travel, and I think in general, if you're going to do extended periods off-grid, you're going to find a compost toilet's probably the way to go.
All right, so what would you say the number one pro to having a composting toilet is?
Definitely, particularly in the context of living off-grid, it's definitely the frequency which it needs to be emptied. So in general, from what we know about cassette toilets is 1 to 2 days, depending on how many people are using it, up to maybe 3 or 4 days maximum before it needs to be emptied. For the compost toilet, we can go anywhere for the solids compartment. So we'll get into more in that in a minute, but it separates the solids and the liquids. The solids compartment anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks up to as long as 3 months, depending on the climate. So that just opens up a huge amount of options as far as travel and where you can go and how long you can stay and things like that before you have to go and find somewhere where you can dump it, is by far the biggest pro in my opinion.
Yeah.
What would you say what's the next biggest pro?
I would say that it doesn't use water. It
Yeah.
doesn't consume any of your fresh water, which means that all your fresh water can be used for drinking, showering, hand washing, dishes, which again extends your time off grid. If you've got a cassette toilet, let us know how much water it uses per flush, and then you can work out how much of that water you need to allocate to your time off grid.
Yeah, because as we've said earlier in this series and all through the series, anyone who spend any amount of time off-grid, water is going to be your number one limiting factor.
Yeah.
I would say another big pro to it is where you can dump it. So we don't actually need dump points because there's no chemical in it and it's already broken down somewhat in the composting process within the toilet. When we go to dump it, that's not raw sewage we're dumping. It's composted to a degree. So depending on when you last used it and things like that, but it can be dumped. I mean, we could dig a hole and dump it out in the bush if it's somewhere really remote. If we're in closer to towns and things like that, it's really as simple as bagging it and putting it into a bin. You don't need a dump point, and in fact you can't really put it down a dump point because it is dry. It doesn't have any liquid to it. It won't go down a dump point. So yeah, that's the next biggest pro, I think, is just it opens up a lot of options as to where we can dump it.
Absolutely. And then with the wee compartment as well, you can tip that down a dump point if you've got access to one, but you can also empty that anywhere you would go and do a bush wee. And it's fine, there's no toilet paper in it, it is just literally wee.
Which is super handy because it's the one you will be emptying that every probably 2 days, depending on how many people are using it. And we'll get into that with the cons or who we think it suits. But yeah, the wee or the liquids bottle that's everything's stored in, yes, you will have to empty that every couple of days. But like Liz said, because the option's there to dump it pretty much anyway. I mean, if we're in a busy campground or in town, generally there's a dump point. If not, we can just drive out of town, off the side of the road and tip it on the ground. It's just wee. It's not that offensive.
Yeah.
Everyone takes a wee in the bush. Like it's no different. We just try and spread it around and not dump it all in one spot, obviously. But yeah, as long as you're a bit sensible about it, you can get away with it. Now, not having to use dump points when it comes to off-grid, not relying on dump points, just makes a massive difference, particularly if you're travelling in some of these more remote areas. Take the Gibb River Road, for example. If you want to enjoy yourself and see a lot of the sites along there, you're probably going to be travelling on the Gibb for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more if you're going all the way up to Mitchell Falls and hanging out for a bit. There's no dump points on the Gibb at all. So from the point you leave Kununurra to the point you arrive in Derby, no dump points. So that tells you that anyone who's travelling that with a cassette toilet, they've got to do something with that waste, right? They can't last 3 weeks without dumping it, whereas you can very easily with a compost toilet. So apart from that liquids bottle like we spoke about, we can dump it at either end or in between if we had to, if we were staying longer. But yeah, it definitely opens up a lot of options there, and we can dump it. As I said, we'd always dig a hole, bury it nice and deep, do the right thing in that respect. But we don't have any sort of problems with that environmentally compared to chemical toilets and things like that. And it is, like I said, out of a cassette toilet, it is effectively raw sewage. So yeah, I think that's the big pro for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so if that's all the pros to a compost toilet, what are the cons? And there are some cons, there are some downsides. What would you say is the number one con?
Sometimes the bricks can be a little bit hard to find, so you use the
compost bricks.
Compost bricks. You used to be able to get them from Bunnings and used to be able to get like a small square one, but they're getting harder and harder to find. You can now get the big ones. So when we find them, we just stock up. If we buy 6 of them, they will last us a year, and they're easy and light to store. What would you say is another con?
Yeah, so I think another con is it is a little bit harder to empty when it does come time to empty the solids. I mean, compared to a cassette toilet where they've normally got an external hatch to access them, you pull the cassette out, it's on wheels, you wheel it to the dump point, tip it in, wash it out, bring it back, put it back in. A relatively painless process. The compost toilet, when it's full, can be a little bit heavier. It probably weighs, 10 to 15 kilos, something like that when it's heavy. It does just unbolt from the floor. So it 2 screws and you can remove the whole toilet, turn it upside down, tip it into a bag or into the hole or whatever it is. If you do want to empty it outside without using a bag, like if you've dug a hole or something like that, you do have to carry it through the van and get it outside to dump it. So depending on how physically fit and able you are, that may be a con for you. But I think the compromise between that and the frequency of emptying it for us is well worth it. It's a bit more involved when it does come to empty it, but like I said, you're doing it so much less frequently.
Who do you think the composting toilet would suit, and what considerations would you need to take into account when you're tossing up between a cassette and a composter?
I think when it comes to extended periods off-grid, the compost wins hands down, just because of, like I said, the infrequency that you've got to empty it, and just the amount of time you can go in between needing any services. Then that's what it's all about when it comes to extended periods off-grid. On the flip side of that, I think if you're only going to do short times or short stays off grid, and then you're going to be in or near a town or in or near a caravan park or something like that, where you've got easy access to a dump point, or you're only doing short trips and then returning home, I don't think a cassette toilet is going to be that inconvenient for you, and you may not get the full convenience out of a compost toilet. But that being said, if you're doing short trips, there's no need to empty your compost toilet in between those trips. In fact, it will only help it. So one of our big tips with the compost toilet is if you can give it a break, as in not contribute to it at all for a period of time, it will last you much, much longer, because that composting process can start to break down what's already in the toilet. So we know of people that haven't emptied their compost toilet for 4 years because they just go away for a week or two at a time, or weekenders and things like that, and in between time the van's sitting in storage. So during that time while it's in storage, that compost can get to work and it breaks down almost 100% of what's in the toilet. So yeah, it really depends on that off-grid ability. If you want that extended off-grid ability and be able to dump your waste environmentally responsibly and do that with without any sort of question mark over ethically whether you should be doing it, I think the compost wins hands down. But yeah, if you're going to be just doing a little bit of that and long periods of time in civilization or near caravan parks, maybe the cassette's better for you. What are some of the other considerations you reckon when it comes to choosing?
Yeah, there's a cost consideration, like an ongoing cost consideration. So with a composting toilet, you'll need to buy, they're called composting bricks, which are basically like coconut husks that you add to your toilet when after you've emptied the solids, you put that in, you add some water. I think they're about $6.
Yeah, about $6.
And that could last us 2 months. Versus a cassette, you are going to need to buy the ongoing cost of the chemicals that you add into that. And I have heard, again, we don't own one, but I think it's around $20 a bottle or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't speculate, but there is a cost involved in the chemicals that you then need to add all the time. So,
yep.
and sourcing those different materials that you need to get.
And on that, I mean, if we've got the wrong end of the stick there, if you've got a cassette toilet and love it and we've got something wrong there, please leave us a comment below and let us know. Like we said, we're only just going off hearsay with a lot of this, so we may not have all the facts straight. There may be things we're not considering with a cassette toilet. I think another consideration with the toss-up between compost and cassette is just the amount of people using it and the frequency that you're going to be using it. Those time periods between empties are really going to vary depending on that. If you're only a couple, you're obviously going to get even longer out of it. If you've got a lot more girls in your family, generally they're going to want to use the toilet, whereas like myself and the boys are happy to wee outside. But that probably goes for both styles of toilet. The fact is you're contributing to them more, they're going to fill up more. Something else we've noticed with the compost toilet is that it definitely is more effective as far as the composting process is concerned in the warmer climates. When it gets cool, the compost just doesn't work as well. Like any compost, it works better when it's warm.
When you say cool, what do you mean? Because we have, that's a variable. What would you say?
Cool weather.
Yeah.
I'd say if the temperatures are in the mid-20s and higher during the day, then the composting is going to go pretty well. If it gets really, really hot, like 30, 35, then it's going to go even better. And we noticed that, definitely when we chased the sun for our first year versus our second year when we went to the snow and the Vic High Country and things like that.
Yeah.
We had to empty it more frequently in those cooler climates than when it was nice and warm. Just the composting process is a lot more effective. And like we said, giving it a break, even a day or two, if you're staying somewhere that has decent toilet facilities, go use their facilities, give your toilet a break and you'll get so much longer out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that pretty well wraps up compost toilets anyway. So like we said, if you've got any questions or anything you want to know about how they work and things like that, leave us a comment below. Go and check out that video that Aussie Destinations Unknown did, like we said, see what they think. We've seen a lot of videos out there on composting toilets, and trust me, go and watch theirs. I think theirs is probably the closest to reality of what it's actually like having a toilet.
Yeah.
There's been some horrible other ones put out there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just experience and how long people have had their toilets before they make videos about them.
Yeah, ADU, like those guys have had theirs even longer than we've had one. And we're both big advocates for them. I think anyone you talk to that's had one for a long period of time, I'd say 95% of people we talk to are glad they went that way, because we tend to meet people travelling off-grid, and as we said, it suits that style of travel the best. So, yeah, anyway, that's composting toilets for you. All right, everyone, well, I hope you enjoyed all of those little tips and tricks and advice about sorting out your waste when you're off-grid. As always, leave us a comment if you've got anything you'd like to add, or if you've got any questions, or if you think we got something wrong. Let us know down below in the comments. We love hearing from you all, and that will be the first step in winning that $100 voucher from Everything Caravan and Camping as well.
Yeah, so if you like this video, give it some love, hit the subscribe button, and you'll get notified when our latest episodes come out. So that'd be great. It's great for you, it's great for us. Everyone wins.
And the next part of our off-grid series that's coming up is going to be a bit of a wrap-up of everything that we've touched on so far, but as well a few updates on a few things that have changed to our water system, our internet system, things like that have changed since we filmed those videos. So a lot of these things are developing quite rapidly. We've got some new ideas on that. So really looking forward to sharing that with you in the next off-grid series, or next off-grid video. Can't wait to share all that with you and more. Heaps more travel content coming up too, and don't forget that 76 series build coming up as well. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that, and we'll see you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday, guys.